vehicle tomorrow is not just for taking you from point A to point B, but doing a lot more with it. Because I use the vehicle only for 2 hours, 3 hours as individuals, and rest of the time it's just idle. Why don't I give back energy to the grid, right? Why don't I share this with multiple people? So there are more models that are coming up because of this now became a digital asset as compared to what it was just a mechanical asset, 25 years ago.
Do you think 100% adoption of EV is going to happen in vehicles? Hi Akshay, welcome to Hard Truths.
Thanks Rahul for having me here.
Yeah, so firstly, do you own an EV?
No, I don't own an EV, but I do lease an EV. I drive a two-wheeler in Bangalore.
Okay. Why lease though?
So when we started building Kazam, I happened to open a YouTube channel along with my co-founder Vaibhav, and we started reviewing a lot of vehicles. And this was called Electric Vehicle News in Hindi as well as in English. And then it garnered around 30,000 views in around 15 odd days. And that's when I realized that I want to, try more vehicles out, and I want to keep reviewing them at that point of time. And I think that model kind of stuck along with me, and hence I, end up leasing these vehicles directly.
But does it also make financial sense to do this over?
Yeah. So, for me, it's basically taking care of the hassle. That I don't really have to worry about selling the vehicle out, doing the registration and all the paperwork. So the kind of effort that I have to put really on that makes more financial sense from my use case perspective. Yeah. Also, the good part about EV is that the total cost of ownership, that owning this vehicle and driving it over a period of time is much cheaper than owning a petrol or a diesel vehicle.
Okay. But is that specifically only for two-wheelers or?
So back in 2020, it was only for 2-3 wheelers.
Okay.
Gradually, we have reached a stage where 2-3 wheelers have really become much cheaper than owning even a petrol vehicle, even on the capex front of it.
Okay.
But 4-wheelers are not there yet.
Okay.
I think they still need another couple of years.
I would like to briefly understand the state of EV in India. So most of the vehicles in India are like 2-3 wheelers.
Correct. Right. So I think India has roughly around 320 million vehicles, 32 crores, of which roughly around 27 crores or 270 million are 2 and 3 wheelers. Yeah. Okay, that's the major chunk of the density. And that market is supposed to be disrupted. The second part is obviously the 4-wheelers and the buses. However, if you look at the biggest brands in the 2-3 wheeler segment, they're all Indian brands. You have the TVS, Bajaj, Mahindra, all of these guys who build 2-3 wheelers here in India. And that is, a technology that needs to be disrupted locally, because our exports are also the highest in the world in this segment altogether.
The most number of sales right now is only for 2-3 wheelers or?
Yeah. So if you look at just EV in that matter, the conversion ratios that have happened. So every month you have roughly around 6 to 7% of new vehicles that are being sold, which are EV in 2-wheelers. Okay. But in 3-wheelers, it has actually caught up a lot of pace. So you see roughly around 30-35%. I think the peak that went up to 50% of new vehicle sales to be EVs. So, and that's all because of, the last mile delivery that happens in India on 2 and 3 wheelers. So whenever you order something on any of the e-commerce websites or on, food delivery, you end up getting a 2 or 3 wheeler trying to deliver to you. And because it makes so much economical sense for them to own an EV, they have started really moving on to this very, very fast. I think even your local auto rickshaw guy who pulls you from one place to another has realized this. And you will now see that even passenger auto rickshaws have transitioned significantly on this segment.
So basically you're saying that, this makes total sense for logistics, whether it's moving people or goods or whatever. So how is it helpful for logistics, and why does it make economical sense for them?
Sure. So when you buy a vehicle, you need to pay an upfront cost of owning it. Yeah. You either take a loan for it or you pay it upfront, right, with cash. So when you look at logistics, you drive more kilometers per day as compared to you and me. Yeah. They're driving anywhere between 150 kilometers, 120 to 150 kilometers. we as individuals are driving less than 35 kilometers a day. So the price per kilometer in an EV era, especially in two-wheelers, is anywhere between 35 paisa to 50 paisa. Okay. And when you're looking at, say, three-wheelers, it comes out to be around a rupee or rupee and a half, which is almost 1/5 or 1/10 as compared to your petrol or a diesel vehicle. So hence, you'll see that when you drive so many more kilometers, you will recover your cost much, much faster. And in some cases, if you just multiply all of this together, it is cheaper than the EMI that you would actually end up paying for EMI plus petrol that you would end up paying for these vehicles. So hence, a lot of fleet companies were the first movers in India in terms of adopting to electric vehicles. Eventuality, because they drove economies of scale, so it became much cheaper for even consumers like you and me to start owning vehicles.
Okay, but there is a time to charge, right? Which is a lot higher than, let's say, pumping a petrol into a two-wheeler or three-wheeler.
We are in this day of EV where you remember your cell phones, right? Yeah. It moved from landlines to cell phones. It took quite some time over there. From cell phones you moved to feature phones, and then which was all text etc. game, and then you moved finally to the data play, and then your phones became much robust. Today you are able to fast charge your phone in 15 odd minutes, right? And then if I would have told you this 10 years back that you would have laughed at me, because it used to take 3 hours to charge your phone. So the same story is really happening on the EV side. The electric vehicle has also become more of an electronics vehicle as compared to a mechanical vehicle that used to be there 20 years ago. Yeah. Right? And that has actually empowered on a couple of things. One is to get data and information out of it, to build intelligence, efficiencies for the future. And second is also to control it remotely from the future, right? And hence, what is happening currently within EV is when we started building, especially in the 2-3-wheeler space, there was no technology that we could even pick from Europe, US or China markets at that point of time. As I said, it was an Indian phenomena, right? And we had to build the charging infrastructure as well. The first thing that we wanted to solve was something called as interoperability. Again, going back to cell phone days, you remember every pin was different, and then you had to carry so many chargers to charge your phones. So similarly in the EV space, everyone had still has like different pins and different protocols to charge the vehicles. We were the first ones to come up with an interoperable slow charger, which would charge a vehicle in 2.5 hours. But at least it was interoperable. So just one charging station, multiple brands of vehicle or form factors to charge. This became an Indian standard because of the kind of utilization that actually started happening on this. But I think 3 years down the line, we are here where we have shown a new technology of charging a vehicle in 25-30 minutes for a 80% bump up. Right. And that is the future state. Right. So we are moving in that direction, similar to your cell phone.
So the thing with the internal combustion engine is that it has been engineered, it's mostly mechanical, and it has been engineered over 100 years, yes. Right? So it's very, very good. And you can even recover things from the junk and turn it again back into a car and make it work. So the reliability and the maintenance, all this becomes also
absolutely higher. So as I said, if you were looking at your landlines which had cables attached to it, they were more reliable, right? They would never go out of signal for you to drop a call, for example. But the eventuality of it is that today my cell phone is also reliable. It works for a whole day. It gives me charge. I can do so much more with it. I can do emails. I can do video calling. I can travel to different countries and still figure out my things, right? And that's the future state of vehicle. Vehicle tomorrow is not just for taking you from point A to point B, but doing a lot more with it. Because I use the vehicle only for 2 hours, 3 hours as individuals, and rest of the time it's just idle. Why don't I give back energy to the grid, right? Why don't I share this with multiple people? So there are more models that are coming up because of this now became a digital asset as compared to what it was just a mechanical asset, 25 years ago. Industrial, the ICE engines actually took, as you said, 100 years to reach this state, right? But then when they were not, when, Benz created the first vehicle, they still had to figure out how to have range anxiety at that point of time. I think we're still getting there. You can definitely scrap all of this, coming to your point on that. but that's also possible with the EV as well. You can recycle these batteries, you can get away everything, anode, cathode, and ensure that you are able to give a second life to most of the parts that are there.
Okay. So at this point, I mean, this will get better over time for sure. But at this point, customers are okay with the...
Yeah, so I think when you look at a product cycle, right, there are obviously the first movers who are enthusiasts who want to own vehicles, right? And they have done very well to showcase to people that, hey, there is a use case available and it works. So as I said, the fleets, right, became one of the champions on the EV space because they use the vehicles so much that it gave data points to insurers, financiers for backing this. Today we have different models. As I said, I'm getting a leased vehicle. There's also a model where you can get battery as a service, where I pay per kilometer of the battery usage. Right, it's something that just recently launched to reduce the ownership cost. So there are different models that are being created because of this champion in the fleets that kind of came in.
You mentioned about fleet guys or the delivery people are the most enthusiastic who's taking up the adoption of EVs. So do you see this is how it's going to play
so the
out?
early movers were this. Yeah. The next set of movers are going to be normal consumers who are really going to come, which are the bulk of the consumers, which is typically the 70-80% mass consumers. And for them, because we've got so much of data points, we're able to develop much better products out of it. There also will enter because now there are multiple options of infra also, charging infra also available. India already has put up around 50,000 odd charge points in the country. So, they're not starting at zero. They don't have to worry that there's absolutely no charge point. I understand that there could still be challenges, but it's not at zero, right? So those are one of the key factors that is actually helping. Apart from that, obviously, the government is also creating a lot of push. So, in the charging, in the EV space, there is a classic saying that it's a chicken and egg problem. Who comes first, whether the vehicle or the charging infrastructure? I think both were playing that game, but the government actually gave a push and ensured that this wheel starts working together like a pendulum, right? So that push has really helped the market, if you look at it in that sense, because there was 3 orders of incentives that were given: FAME 1, FAME 2, FAME 3. And that has created this impetus in the market and created that champion in the fleets company.
So what were FAME 1, 2 and 3?
Yeah, so FAME is faster adoption of mobility in electric, a SOP that kind of allowed you to own vehicles, especially electric vehicles, at a much cheaper cost. The government would subsidize the cost of ownership so that you can experiment in owning this. The first idea was to get it at least 1.1x or 1.2x the cost of an ICE vehicle, so that you don't really have much problems in kind of paying it. And slowly, the government has been pushing the level of quality, the level of from the manufacturing side, that the amount of parts that have to be sourced locally. So this is also creating an ecosystem within the country and also allowing consumers to buy these vehicles at a much cheaper cost. So that is that whole inertia push that the government actually did. And there have been 3 series, and these are not small values. These started at 10,000 crores.
The incentives were mostly for the manufacturers themselves of the vehicles, right? So you mentioned that, okay, there's a chicken and egg thing where infra also needs possibly incentives. So
Correct.
Now the incentives are focused on...
So there is actually, that's a great question, right? So finally there was this push that was happening on the vehicle side. And in this particular one, version 3, which has been renamed as PM e-drives, has a very specific push for the infrastructure as well. In the FAME 1 and 2, it was only pushed towards government-owned entities, which would own charging infrastructure and the public spaces. But I think in this, they've done a special focus on the 2-wheelers and the 3-wheelers, especially on the fast charge points. It outlays anywhere between upwards of 40,000 charge points that can be put over a period of 3 years by these entities otherwise as well. There's still more clarity to be driven, whether it is just the public sector that will put it or even the private sector that will be allowed to get incentives to put these.
Do you think 100% adoption of EV is going to happen in vehicles?
I think 100% adoption of petrol also did not happen because there was a mix of CNG, right? So I'm going to just say that I wouldn't reach up to 100%, but I think what's more important is how do you create critical mass to move on EV very, very quickly. And I think the kind of numbers that the government has laid out, it has said 30% by 2030. So 30% of 300 million roughly is around 100 million, right? I think we should get there because the three-wheelers have proven a very good model, right? We're already at 40% of new vehicle sales. It is quite possible to reach that kind of numbers on an aggressive basis. But if I have to be realistic, I think it will be anywhere between the 20 and 25% mark. 100% over a period of 100 years, yes, definitely. But I still feel that there will be coexistence of other fueling types, right? So there is, people are experimenting with hydrogen, people have to transition out of petrol. There's CNG that's there, there's ethanol that's already there, other forms of fuel. So there will be a little bit of experimentation, but the market is very, very large for any one of them. It is said that typically GDPs are measured with the growth of automobile sector in that country. Yeah. And that's how large this sector is, right? So to get disrupted.
Yeah. Oh, so what about the hybrid models? I think in China, so there are these models where you have a small ICE engine inside a EV sort of setup, and actually the internal combustion engine is actually charging the battery.
Correct.
So this removes the range anxiety and other things.
It does remove, and I think there's a big debate happening in India as well because of the tax structure that has been created. So if you own an EV in India, the registration fees is 5%, okay? As compared to another vehicle, which is almost it starts at 28%. Okay, so people have been debating whether a hybrid should be in midway, right? There are two models available in the hybrid section. One is a pure hybrid, which does not have any way for you to charge this vehicle. So it completely relies on your ICE engine to kind of ensure that the battery gets charged. And whenever you're braking, it charges back the battery. But there's another model which is called as the plug-in hybrid. So you can actually charge your vehicle in it, and this will give you city driving. So, you can drive around the city just with your EV, ensuring the tailwind, the pollution is kind of dropped off. And whenever you want to do intercity, you don't have to really worry about, stopping for a amount of time to just charge your vehicle. It will use the petrol or diesel which is there and then charge your vehicle.
Yeah. You mentioned that, okay, we need to quickly get to a critical mass for EV adoption. What are the sort of challenges or obstacles?
I would call it as the inflection point. So, as I said, three-wheeler is already there. Like we are now selling in tier 3, tier 4 cities. And they are selling much, much faster than the urban cities here in India. As in the two-wheeler space, we are almost there in the inflection point. I think it's just a matter of maybe 3 or 4 months before it goes off. Actually, there was a change in the subsidy that was given, especially last year. And it has fully recovered, or rather recovered much better when the subsidy was partially removed. The sale of vehicles have started happening. So when I started 4 years ago, people started asking me that whether EVs are really going to happen. When I used to go to VCs, right, because you get rejected all the time. So they would say that, is EV really going to happen? And today when I talk to people, they don't even ask me this question whether EV is really going to happen. And that is the phase that we've already passed, right? And that is the mindset that has already been created. And most of the guys who are now thinking to buy a vehicle are really comparing whether to own an EV or a petrol vehicle, which was not the case some time back. And that is the first step. So I think four-wheelers are not there yet, but with the kind of business models that have been created around this, especially about getting battery as a service, just paying per use of the battery, is a great way to kind of show financial engineering in this market.
I was talking to my brother-in-law. I spoke to him maybe a year back. He lives in Delhi, so he was saying that, okay, I should consider buying an EV. This time around, I was speaking to him like a month ago, and he was saying that, no, I'm not buying EV. Mostly because his concern is, again, range anxiety.
Yeah.
So what is the real issue here now?
Okay. So if you are if you're in the city, you drive less than 25 to max 50 kilometers a day, right? But your vehicle is able to take that much charge. Now there are a lot of hindrances even to charge your own vehicle, especially in cities. We live in multi condos, right? We live in apartments, and these places have their own set of rules. So they would not even allow you to set up charging points in your housing societies or in your workplaces because of cabling issues, or who really pays for that energy that is being consumed if it is put in common areas. How do I collect money? So on and so forth. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are not really opting to get there. The second problem is your brother-in-law would be considering buying a car and not really the 2 and 3 wheeler, right?
It's car. Yeah.
It's a car, and cars are still not as cheap as owning an ICE vehicle today in India. They're still 1.4x the cost of an ICE vehicle. So again, a little bit of more hindrance around it. And then the third problem statement is that the public infrastructure in terms of going from city to city is not up to there, right? There would also be some synchronization that would be needed between the vehicle and the charger, which may not have been installed correctly from the manufacturer sides, from either side. It could be not just one problem, right? So these are some of the challenges that are there, which is there today in the market, and that has to be kind of taken care of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was reading an article by Park Plus. I think they're a parking plus I think charging operator or something in Delhi, and they say that people have what is called charging anxiety because of the lack of accessibility, reliability, and good service from the infrastructure point. You would say that is true at the moment?
Accessibility, yes, but it's being solved in a major way, right? When you look at the models that we have created for 2 and 3 wheelers, every 3 wheeler that is being sold in the market gets bundled with a Kazam charge point today, and it's installed in your house as a part of the vehicle itself. It's that model that vehicle OEMs have also started understanding, because all the incumbents who were the market leaders in the ICE era have started selling electric vehicles, and they have understood that they can't really play with the brand that they've already created. So they want to give great experience. So accessibility is getting solved with that. If you look at charging infrastructure, I break it up into 3 parts. First one is home charging, which is there in your home, which is accessible to you and you can charge every day. Second is called as a community charging, which is shared between multiple people, but in a restricted captive zone, right? Could be a housing society, a fleet's warehouse, or workplace, right? And the third one is the public infrastructure. The OEMs have understood private charging, which is a home charging, and they've started bundling this. So this is one thing that is getting solved very, very quickly. And when it comes to public infrastructure, there's a lot of hue and cry, but actually in your whole life cycle, you would end up only charging maybe 20% or less in the public spaces. Tell me, how many times have you done city to city travel on your own car? Very few, right? So that's the problem over there. It's just a mental blockage on that sense. So accessibility, I would say, is getting solved very, very fast. Reliability, yes, I think it's a very major concern that has to be solved. There are so many apps, there are so many different protocols available, form factors of vehicles that are there, and all of them were creating their own stack. But finally, there has been some consensus that has been kind of done in the market. So there are finally 2 forms of guns, at least in the 2-wheeler side. You have the Type 6 and the Type 7. They're just different shapes. But then the communication protocol on the background remains the same. So you are now able to interoperably charge and even fast charge these vehicles.
The quality of service.
Even in the EV market, if you look at the charging infrastructure market, in the last couple of years, or this year, last year specifically, a lot of consolidation has happened. So the people who are not able to deliver quality are not able to survive in the market. And hence you have these number 1 or number 2 players slowly emerging out very, very clearly in this market. And I think it's that eventuality that will really happen over there. Again, I would again go back to your cell phone industry. In India, you used to get these phones which were low-grade Chinese phones, and which had like great features, but they would only last 6 months, right? So we're still in that phase where, the Samsung is going to come out emerging out of this, or the Xiaomi is going to come out emerging out of this, and that brand will survive to give that reliability. We're in the midst of consolidation in the market at this point of time. So I think it's a matter of a year or two in that sense.
Okay. Would you say building charging infrastructure is the most critical thing for?
So I think what has happened is because of the push of the incentives that were given, vehicle sales have started happening.
Okay.
But infrastructure did not move fast.
Yeah, it's
so it's as I said, the chicken and egg. So one has moved further and the other one has not. And because they were not focused on quality as well, it was just a namesake number to hit at that point of time. Especially from the public infrastructure that was being created. So now they are cutting the chase. They are trying to move much faster and reach the same lure. So that is where I said the first piece of private charging did not exist all this while, has started happening in the last 6-7 months in the country, right? So it was only about fleets, community charging for the fleets that were happening all this while, but it has now moved to the passenger side as well.
So what are the different layers of the EV infrastructure?
So first you have the hardware. Now this hardware is like a digital tool which is trying to understand energy which is being used to charge your vehicle and sending that same set of data on the cloud. Now it has two things to do. One is to identify the vehicle that has come to charge, and second to also collect this information and send it to the cloud. Now, how does it do this? One, it has a firmware inside it to identify this. Okay. So hardware, then the firmware. And then the third piece is the software layer, which is sitting on top of it, which is called the CMS, or the charging management software, which then connects multiple different charging stations to the cloud. This charging management software also manages payments, authentication to know, whether Rahul came to charge, Akshay came to charge, or someone else came to charge. It also does something called as load balancing. So you don't have to change your wiring that was already done in your premises. So it will identify the maximum energy limit that it can reach, all charging stations switched on together, and balance it. Okay. So it does it at a local level and can also do it at a dynamic level with this whole charging management piece. It also manages safety. Okay, so this is the third layer. Now then there is a layer on top of it, which is called as the roaming layer. So how do I share this set of chargers that I have created as an operator with some other operator? If Rahul, you were to build another infrastructure company and you were to have 1,000 odd charge points, now we would want to share these charge points with each other so that the end consumer does not again have to worry about quality of service where he has to download tens of apps to kind of do it. He could just be on one single app, that is the Kazam app, and he can find all of this infrastructure and pay for it just through us. So it is like saying that how do you roam on your cell phone, right? With one operator to another operator, very similar. The towers are typically shared on the background, which is the backbone of the infrastructure for a telecom. It's a similar model that really works. There are layers that you can create on the left of charging infrastructure, which is how it receives energy. And then on the right, how do I generate demand and optimize the utilization? So expenses and revenue of the charging station. So that is another stack that can be built. And when you build this whole horizontal stack around energy, that is, the unified energy gateway, where you can actually connect and start selling energy from the charging infrastructure back to the grid, or even consume energy from the grid to the vehicle, right? So there are two stacks, like a plus. One is vertically for the charging infrastructure, and one is horizontally for the energy.
Which are the layers where Kazam operates?
Yeah. So as I said, we wanted to be a software company. Okay, that's how we started. When we entered the market, we just wanted to solve for the load of the utility. Weber is the other co-founder. He used to work with a solar-based startup, and while talking to utilities, they told him that, hey, you know what? When all of us as human beings come back home at 6-7 in the evening, we would all plug our vehicles. Okay, and a EV would take anywhere between one house to 10 houses worth of energy, basis on what vehicle it is. And if everyone does that, then you need like 10 power plants just to take care of this, right? So that was the biggest problem for all these utilities. And to solve this, we wanted to build a software that would manage all of this energy on the background. But when we entered the market, we realized that there is no hardware only for 2-3 wheelers, right? As I said, it was all an Indianized, technology. So we started building on the white spaces of 2-3 wheeler hardware. Then we built this charging management software, which is agnostic to any vehicle form, whether 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler, 4-wheeler, buses. So today we have even one of the largest oil and gas companies within the country, Hindustan Petroleum, which uses Kazam's software to manage payments, authentication, everything on the background. Then on the sides that we saw of the horizontal platform,
the energy
energy exchange, right? So we've started on the demand side, where we're able to get multiple vehicle OEMs have on their dashboard all the charge points, so you could just access from there and no need to have multiple vehicles. So you just plug the gun and then it identifies your vehicle and your name, etc. And then it starts sending out data in terms of how much energy you've consumed. And the second piece is, how do I optimize energy for my charging infrastructure? There are infrastructure players who have multi-mix of energy, one from the utility, one from the solar grid that they have put, and they could also be using DG in case of diesel generator, in case of any kind of disruption that happens in the energy, right? So there's this mix that happens, and hence the cost of energy could vary significantly basis on each form of that, and we help optimize all of this on the background. So this is the stack. So we call this as energy management, EMS, CMS, which is the charging management, and then the demand generation.
So who's building out all these charging points?
So Kazam is software, right? We are the enablers for infrastructure, but without these investments done by infrastructure players, there is no EV at all. Absolutely, right? Yeah. So there are obviously oil and gas companies who are transitioning into new energy, and they have land available, they have petrol pumps available. They are setting up infrastructure in each one of these petrol pumps to solve for the interstate. The second piece is there are e-commerce players who already have land, who have warehouses, and they could allow consumers or their fleet guys to come and charge over there. So they are becoming again infrastructure players. They're owning the assets and trying to do that. Third one is there are new age startups who are actually understanding this business model of setting up infrastructure of say 50-100 charge points. They're becoming more of micro entrepreneurs and saying that if I do this investment, I could be at anywhere between 35 to 40% IRR, and they're investing and trying to get money out of it. So again, they need a single brand to kind of cohesive and get a demand for that. Again, Kazam helps them with all of these things. There's also a utility program. So because the utility is the biggest beneficiary in terms of selling energy, they will sell now more energy with EVs coming in, right? So there are programs by certain cities to ensure that infrastructure is being put for charging. So I think the Delhi city had with the 3 utility companies of BSES, Rajdhani, Yamuna, and Tata Power to set up infrastructure for the whole city of Delhi for your housing societies. Because if the utility company tells that it is allowed for you to put a charging infrastructure in your housing society, then it kind of jumps all the hurdles of going through the whole process of setting this up.
So energy companies, if they're selling more energy, a lot more energy than before, then our grid capacity also has to increase, right? Significantly.
Yeah. You are right, but I wouldn't say that it is needed today. If you look at grid companies, they work at anywhere between 60 to 65% efficiency. There's always this 30-35% loss that is there.
Okay. This is beyond transmission loss.
This is, so apart from the transmission loss, and it is typically a sinusoidal kind of a curve, where you have peak loads and then you have the downfall. Yeah. Now, all utility companies want to, make it a flat line, which is very, very difficult to happen. And because EVs are also going to come during peak loads of charging, which is 6-7 in the evening or morning, right? Yeah. So they want to kind of push this. So how do you do this? They're trying to create incentive programs called as time of day charging. So you charge during non-peak hours, you pay less, right? Or players like us who are helping them schedule during off-peak hours. So at off-peak, they are shelling out energy. They're ready to even they're losing money because it's not about zero value that they get for it, but they're actually paying a rupee or two to just discharge it onto the ground. So that is one of the play that is available. Second, what utility companies are also doing is they're creating storage in between. What I mean by storage is battery storage. They're storing all of this energy. So during peak time, they could actually switch this on separately, and then they could start allowing you to charge during the peak times. So for now, I feel if you just work on the efficiency part of the grid, right, there is enough capacity, at least till we hit maybe 30-35% of EVs in the market to manage this, right? And in a very optimistic way, if I have to tell, even if there are 100% EVs, the kind of calculations that have happened is that you don't really need newer grid capacity. The good thing about India is that we built a grid very recently. Okay, unlike the West, where the grid was there for quite some time and they had a lot of issues when EVs kind of came in as a separate load. I think India had very recently reached almost every house having electricity, and because it was built just now, so there is enough capacity, at least from an India perspective, to do. But if you look at, say, Southeast Asia or other markets, then it is very different. I was just doing this research somewhere in Indonesia and in Vietnam. The energy load in their house is 1 kilowatt or 1.5 kilowatt.
Okay.
Which is very less. Even if I have to charge my two-wheeler, it would end up consuming the whole house energy.
So you mentioned about storage, right? I keep thinking, is the carbon footprint of using EV really less than ICE? Storage means a lot of minerals dug up from earth.
Not necessary. Storage can also be a hydro pump.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you have excess energy, just pump and take it all the way up to the well.
Yeah.
And then when you don't want, just use the hydro to create energy, right? So we need not really be just minerals to put up batteries over there, like physical batteries that we really envision, right? So even when I got into this business, I never really thought that you could pump up tanks together and then use it as storage, which is also called as battery storage in a way. So so there are multiple models that are available apart from just creating this. The second thing is there's this whole new wave of EVs that are coming up, and their batteries, which is lithium ion or lead acid batteries, this will have a second life in terms of storage, which is already there, right? So that again reduces the footprint. The third thing that I really want to say is, if you just look at the overall efficiency of EVs, right, as compared to an ICE vehicle has 25-30% efficiency in terms of the calorific value that it actually burns fuel to powering it. But on an EV, it is much higher. It's almost 2x. Okay. So it's ranging between 65-70%. So we've already saved significantly over there. Also the transmission, if you look at right from the grid, transmitting it from coal, just imagine that everything was coal. If it would still reach your EV and you would charge, you would still have a delta of 30-35%. Okay. So when you're doing this whole calculation about carbon accounting, carbon credits, we see that delta happening because of, when you're comparing that with the coal generated energy.
And you mentioned the grid capacity in Indonesia, Vietnam is not as good as what is in India. So you guys are also trying to expand to Southeast Asia. So how is the Southeast Asian market? And actually, why? So if it is so bad, then why did you decide to expand?
Actually, we are not in Vietnam and Indonesia yet. It's a problem that I'm still thinking on how to solve for. I think our first markets that we really are looking at are Malaysia and Thailand, because of the demographic, the sheer number of people that are there over there, as well as the similarity between India and these markets. Again, two-wheeler first, a lot of gig workers doing deliveries. Rather, you have even bike taxis that take you from one place to another, right? And all of that has to be disrupted very, very quickly in these markets. So that is something that we're really excited about. We also have a lot of partnership with vehicle OEMs, where I said that our products get bundled along with the vehicle. So they are also eyeing these markets in terms of expansion. They've already been selling a lot of ICE vehicles here. So for them, the distribution has not been the challenge. I think what we wanted is an anchor customer to help us get into these markets. Our first experimentation is really the SAARC market, where we're really looking at Sri Lanka and the neighboring countries to kind of see whether penetration is happening with these vehicle OEMs, and then take one step forward towards Southeast Asia.
If you were to do EV infrastructure of Singapore, right? Like, I know you've been here only briefly. How would you do it? Because I don't know how we can have infrastructure, like, because most people here live in flats.
Correct.
Right.
Similar problem as India, right?
Yeah.
All urban cities in India live in flats.
Yeah.
So the first way to do this is put it in the common areas of parking, right? Because not everyone will transition to EV next day, right? So the common areas could have EV infrastructure, which could be built to your housing society, and that identifies whether Rahul came or Akshay came to charge, and then they would also make money in between, so that the rest of the residents don't bear the cost of your electricity consumption over there. The second phase also, again, I think the fleets are the first ones which will start moving. So you will see CDG already having few electric vehicles when you take the taxi out here, right? So again, those will act like the bedrock of understanding what could go wrong, what could go right, which models work well, both in terms of the vehicle as well as the charging infrastructure, and then replicate again into the residential zones. The second play is also workplaces. Again, all your workplaces are multi-storied, very long, tall buildings, right? These could also be places where you could start putting up infrastructure, especially at your parking spot. So if, say, Vertex had 20 parking spot available, then you could start with 2, where you have infrastructure available, and then you could allow your employees to at least think about owning an EV, even if their housing society does not have. They could come to office and charge, because they're anyway staying 7-8 hours in office.
Yeah.
And that's way more power than you need, because your vehicle has upwards of 250 kilometers. And I don't think you drive more than 50 kilometers, right? So you'll get a week along with it. So yeah, so those are, I think, some few ways that you can really start. But if I were the Singapore government, then I would think of utilities as one of the best routes to reach every consumer, because electricity is distributed. It's in the studio today here, right? So distribution is not the problem. It's about how do I create hardware to sell this energy efficiently to that.
You also mentioned this unified energy gateway.
Yes, that's the horizontal gateway that I was. So when I explained about how the stack works, there's a plus, right?
Yeah.
So the plus, the vertical is about the charging stack that is there, but the horizontal is the energy stack, which is unifying all of this. So in India, we're also working very closely to build UEI, which is the Unified Energy Interface. This is very similar to UPI, which disrupted payments in India, right? We're doing 1 million transactions a day kind of thing. So that is exactly what we want to do with, energy. Charging is one of the lowest hanging fruits that is available to get disrupted, because it is there here and now. So you can start disrupting. The protocols are very shattered. So how do I get them all into a single play? So that is something that we are working very, very closely with the Beacon team and FIDE to help this happen. But even for the vision of Kazam, right, is to be the unified energy gateway. We are not a charging company. We are an energy company. We're just trying to connect, use the digitization tool, which has now been equipped in the energy space. Charging was the first one that got digitized, right? And was able to tell me how much energy is getting dispensed for the vehicle. So today we've already started digitizing vehicle in terms of how much energy it has consumed and whether it has excess energy to give back to the grid. And at a very local level, we've started even digitizing the energy consumption. Which I told you, right? There could be 3 forms. There could be solar, there could be your normal utility, and the diesel generator, right? So we were doing this small experiment with large vehicles, like heavy vehicles, right? And they have to work irrespective of day or night, energy or no energy. They have to do their deliveries irrespective. And that's when we realized that they would have to actually have all these forms of energy. And they had like only 20 vehicles, but the energy consumption was upwards of 300K USD per month.
Okay.
And if you save 10% of that, it's significant, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that is something that we've started building on. So this, when we do the whole horizontal stack, we become an energy gateway. Think of it like payment gateway, which will allow you to get do payments from any different application. So the energy gateway will allow you to buy, sell, find ways, access for all of these transactions that you'd want to do on an energy world.
Nice. Okay. To summarize, EV is definitely happening.
Yes.
And infra is the key. And then there is a lot of push, not just in India, probably everywhere, to make this happen. And then as far as Kazam, I think what you see yourself is more like bringing a lot of efficiency into the supply and demand of energy creation to energy consumption.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Rahul.